Welcome back to yet another Destiny 2 video. Today, we're going to be talking about the new class swords that were reintroduced in Season of the Splicer. Quickfang for Hunters, CrownSplitter for Titans, and Eternity's Edge for Warlocks. But how do these swords stack up to their competition? Are they worth using for anything outside of their novelty value? That's the question I'm going to try to answer today with this Destiny 2 weapon review. Before we begin, if you like what you see here, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, and if you ever want to catch me live streaming some Destiny 2, my Twitch channel is linked in the description below. Anyways, let's get to it. We'll start with Quickfang, which is the sword exclusive to Hunters, and it's a void damage, lightweight frame sword. Quickfang is also the only lightweight frame sword currently in the game, meaning you will gain a slight bonus to movement speed while using this weapon. Quickfang has a based impact of 60, although this can be increased by having a blade in the first column, as well as the impact masterworks that all swords roll with. It also has the highest swing speed of any sword in the game at the moment, with an 82 swing speed stat. However, due to it being a lightweight frame in tandem with its potential random rolls, Quickfang will likely do less boss damage than most other swords in the game, including options like the Lament, Falling Guillotine, and adaptive frame swords like Bequest or Negative Space. I know in the past, Gold Tusk, the version of this sword available from the Menagerie, was able to do high boss damage, but I'm not quite convinced that the rolls on this version are quite that strong. In terms of base damage, Quickfang, with a major spec mod equipped, deals 17,243 damage to Carl in the Nessus Lost sector with each light attack, and 51,728 with a heavy attack. Something to note about Quickfang compared to all other swords, even the adaptive frames, is that it has almost no end lag at all on its heavy attack, meaning that you can use the heavy attack and get right back to light attacks with this sword very quickly. Quickfang is also a fantastic sword for ad clearing, since it has so much potential ammo with a base capacity of 74, being higher than all other swords in the game right now. In addition to this, Quickfang is the only sword that can currently roll the trait One for All, which activates a 35% damage buff after hitting 3 separate targets. One for All gives Quickfang the full 35% buff, unlike other perks like Surrounded, which actually do give a smaller bonus on swords compared to other weapons. One for All brings Quickfang's damage on Carl up to 23,278 per light attack and 69,832 per heavy attack. This damage buff makes One for All on Quickfang the best options for close quarters melee ad clear in my opinion, since you get a 10-second damage buff on such a fast sword, and it's definitely the best perk in the final column of this weapon. Overall, I think Quickfang is 100% worth using as a hunter if you can get one with One for All, since it manages to stand out from the crowd. Falling Guillotine and the Lament, as well as a good Negative Space or Bequest, are probably still better for things like raids or nightfalls where you might need to kill a boss with your sword, but I can see Quickfang being useful in things like a roaming raid encounter or in a raid encounter where your boss damage is not coming from your sword. The third column perk for Quickfang, in my opinion, does not matter too much. I like energy transfer for getting class ability cooldown back, but there's nothing really wrong with any of the other possible perks in the third column, and I just happen to get one with energy transfer instead of a different perk. Turning now to Titans, the void damage aggressive frame sword CrownSplitter makes a return. CrownSplitter is currently the game's only aggressive frame sword, and as an aggressive frame, its heavy attack is an overhead slam, similar to Young Wolf's Howl from Destiny 1 if anyone played that. CrownSplitter also deals the most single swing damage of any sword with a base impact of 72, but has a slow swing speed, coming in at only 10 for its swing speed, the lowest of any sword in the game. The role I have for CrownSplitter features both Relentless Strikes and Surrounded, and it should be noted that even though Surrounded is normally a 30% damage buff, swords only receive a 25% buff when using the perk. Surrounded spec will increase the sword's damage to 35% when surrounded by 3 or more enemies, down from the normal 40% that Surrounded spec gives to other weapons. On Carl, CrownSplitter's light attacks hit for 25,376, and its heavy attacks hit for 76,128. With Surrounded and a Surrounded spec, these values will increase to 34,258 for light attacks and 102,773 for heavy slams. Vorpal Weapon is also available on this sword, which I think I should point out, but I also don't think that it's the best perk for this sword simply due to the fact that CrownSplitter is not going to compete with Falling Guillotine or the Lament for boss damage, and it's more of a close-range answer to elites like Yellow Bar Knights or Captains, but it won't compare to the Lament or Falling Guillotine for bosses or champions. Vorpal Weapon only provides a 15% buff against certain enemy types, while Surrounded can give you up to 35% while you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies if you have the Surrounded spec mod equipped. As a whole, however, I think CrownSplitter's fun, and it's a fine choice for many situations, but I'm unlikely to pick it over an option like Guillotine, because Guillotine can also match the burst damage while having better overall DPS. Don't hate the sword, not going to replace my Guillotine though. Lastly, the Warlock Sword Eternity's Edge also returns, and it is received what is, in my opinion, the biggest buff of any of the class swords. Originally, Eternity's Edge was an adaptive frame sword with a unique perk Infinite Guard, which provided a good defensive buff and high efficiency. This sword, as a result of that, however, failed to feel as unique as either Quickfang or CrownSplitter on its original release due to simply having the uppercut heavy attack of most swords. However, in Season 14, the new version of Eternity's Edge is a Vortex frame, the same type of sword as Falling Guillotine or Destiny 1's Dark Drinker. It makes Eternity's Edge much better than it used to be, but as a quick disclaimer, it will not be a better boss damage option than Guillotine's Relentless Strike's Whirlwind Blade roll, in my opinion. Just gonna get that out of the way now. It can, however, get surrounded, and it's also solar damage. So for certain content where solar damage is favored, there's a reason to pick Eternity's Edge over Falling Guillotine. Most notably, getting the exotic legs from the Lost Sector this week, it had solar burn. I used Eternity's Edge on my Warlock because I got that bonus damage for having a solar Vortex frame swords. My roll of Eternity's Edge came with Thresh and Surrounded, which as mentioned previously works different for swords, giving a slightly smaller buff than with other weapons. But with this setup and a Surrounded spec mod, we will deal 16,302 damage with a light attack, and our heavy attack hits 6 times for 10,129 damage each, for a total damage on the spin of 61,134. And Surrounded, with a Surrounded spec mod, will push our light attacks to 22,008 damage, and our heavy attacks to a total of 82,531 total damage. I think that this sword is able to provide a good alternative to Falling Guillotine for things like dungeons and raid encounters where the sword either needs to be solar damage or is going to be used on general enemies instead of a boss. Definitely worth picking up for all the Warlock mains out there. Overall, I think that each of these swords have a use in their own right, but I think that Quickfang with One for All and CrownSplitter and Eternity's Edge with Surrounded are the best perks to chase on each of these swords. Each sword is definitely something I'm excited to make builds around, and I think that as far as Quickfang and Eternity's Edge go, they're able to stand out from the crowd, and CrownSplitter, while unique, sometimes fails to live up to its competition, but is still a fun choice. However, that's all from me for this video. Are you excited to land some rolls of these new class swords? Let me know in the comments down below, and remember, if you like what you saw here, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, as well as checking out my Twitch that's linked down below, where we're going to be live streaming some Destiny for the next week with Iron Banner and the Vault of Glass race. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.